welcome everyone again to the next in the series of Startup Diaries run by Bernd Sheehan. Really appreciate everyone tuning in live and those who are listening to it as a podcast or on YouTube afterwards. Really appreciate your attendance. Today we are joined by Andy Taylor, CEO of Collabco, an EdTech business based over in Liverpool. We'll be focusing on some of the restructuring and changes that Collabco have gone throughout the more recent period of obviously ever since COVID hit, and how they're going to use that to springboard themselves throughout the rest of the year. So I guess diving in, Andy, welcome. Thanks for being on this with us. I really appreciate it. Do you want to just start off by telling us a bit about yourself, Collabco, and just give us a bit of background to the business, if that's okay to start with?
Sure. Yeah. No. Thank you for having me. I'm part of an esteemed bunch of people so far. It's a really good series. So, yeah, delighted to be here. Great to see the a solid attendance as well. I've been with Collabco for just over 2.5 years now. As you say, based in Liverpool, but very much with global aspirations. We've got about 100 customers operating around the world. So sites in Australia, New Zealand, and parts of Northern Europe. Primarily an engagement platform and primarily in education. So we actually provide critical services to students, members of staff, alumni, prospective students, and it's their gateway into the university and college. We also have a couple of other customers in things like healthcare and local government as well, and very similar principle. Before I was at Collabco, I was actually a competitor of Collabco. I ran the sales function for Europe, Middle East and Africa for a couple of years, and prior to that I was actually a very similar sized company to Collabco as well. So almost gone back a few years in terms of the stage of the business, but in quite a different role now.
Well, you're actually the first guest that we've had on who's become the CEO of a startup, but isn't actually the founder, which is obviously quite a unique sort of situation to come from previous guests. So I guess what does that bring? What challenges does that bring when you're taking the reins and driving a business from the early stages, which you didn't found?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating one, actually. I mean, the short answer, it brings a lot of kind of baggage and really kind of personal and emotional baggage for me. I look at some of the guests you've had on here already, people like Michael that really have put in that early graft. They've come up with an idea and actually created it. That I think that's probably the hardest part of the journey, really. And I had this thing actually when I first started this role. I had this really strange thing that I do where people assume that you're a founder because it is a startup, and I think obviously I'm quite young as well, so people just assume it. The only way I would have got here is if I'd created it myself, kind of thing. And I used to be introduced as founder, and a couple of times I just wouldn't correct them, and I realised it's actually it's a disservice to me. It's also a disservice to founders of businesses out there. I mean, I think it does change the role slightly. We do have the founder that is still in our business, and you really have to manage that relationship well. You have to manage the expectations of the business well. You have to manage investors in a way of actually convincing them that you can take someone else's idea and take someone else's baby almost, and nurture that and grow it and scale it in the way that investors and the team want. And for the last couple of years in the business, that's really been kind of my single objective, to try and get this business to the scale that it's worthy of. The product is incredibly strong. The market fit has been tested extensively now, and we know how compelling the offering is. So it's really my job to take someone else's dream, someone else's idea, and help along that journey. But it's quite different. It's not as kind of emotional a journey for me as it might be for a founder. But I think that does give some advantages. But on the other side, it really, I'm not short of passion for the business, but you see a founder and you feel something about them that I have to work quite hard to try and emanate myself. So it's a fascinating thing, actually, and one that I have kind of accepted now and really taken forward.
Good. Well, I guess sort of diving into the questions on to sort of fill this podcast or this webinar. diving in, how have the last few months been for you during the pandemic? How has it impacted the business in terms of things like people, products, and your market as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hardest thing about the last few months, I think, for everyone really, is the uncertainty. You know, we really were hit with this pretty much out of the blue. There were some early indications, obviously, coming from China and parts of Europe of the extent, but even that part, the kind of early warning was fairly short-lived, and we found ourselves in the midst of this. The way we approached it really at the very beginning was that old adage of planning for the worst and hoping for the best. We really put together a plan that looked at the world in a really kind of negative way. We thought about, well, what if we lost our customers? What if budgets in education really were squeezed? What if student numbers dropped, which is how we charge our subscription revenue? And we really built a financial model firstly that tried to understand where the business would be in that scenario. That went through a few iterations. We had great support from our investors that were obviously looking at other businesses in either similar markets or completely different markets and bringing that experience to bear in those discussions. And what we ended up with was what we've called a kind of COVID plan, a baseline plan that is fairly negative, so fairly cautious rather than negative might be a better way of describing it. We're not anticipating huge growth this year. We were anticipating customers deciding to maybe take a break in their contract and things like that. And we started in March looking at building the business from that basis. We also took advantage of every scheme that was available to us. I think, like any other sensible business, evaluating the options that were available and taking the ones that we could make work. So we did, extensively furlough staff at that point, as a precautionary mechanism to just protect the business in the uncertainty. And we also stepped up our customer communications and our customer engagement to make sure they knew we were with them on this journey. And I think, I'm sure this will just form the basis of the rest of our discussion, but the three areas that you're really looking at is the effect on your people, the team, the culture, the impact on personal individuals of being stuck at home while everyone else was stuck at home and not having that kind of routine and regularity that a job offers. Got the big impact on customers. As hard as it is for us, it's equally as hard for our customers, in some cases even harder if they're worse affected. And the third one is just about the business generally, obviously taking into account the first two, but is this business going to scale at the rate that we need it to? Is this business going to leap forward again this year as it has done for the last 2 to 3 years? And, I think to the credit of the team and, with some really, great conversations with people like you, keeping our finger on the pulse in the market, speaking to customers, we actually found that all of our predictions were proved to be heavily pessimistic. We actually had a record trading quarter, April to June. We signed, I think, four colleges in the first month of the kind of pandemic hitting. Kind of year to date, we're at 9. We've signed our first sites in Germany, first site in Denmark, another site in the Netherlands, with a few more European opportunities coming through. We've really found that our product is hitting the spot in this crisis.
Yeah.
So we've been proved wrong, and what it's meant is we've actually planned for the worst case scenario. We've over furloughed, been able to bring people back earlier than we planned. We've been overly cautious on spending and expansion plans, but now we're actually starting to unlock some of that budget to grow into some of these regions we see as being great opportunities. And I sit here today kind of wondering how we got here almost. It's been a blur of 6 months. And I mean, it's interesting for you, isn't it? Because we've spoken a lot, obviously, in your line of business. The people side is what you and I talk about. But for me, being able to have a connection like you that's so embedded in so many businesses across the Northwest, knowing what's happening in the market, you must have seen similar things with other businesses.
Yeah, well, what's funny about obviously one of the conversations we had is obviously there's a lot of doom and gloom, and there has been a sort of a lot more businesses, like you say, preparing for the worst, hoping for the best, and I think a lot of the time it's just come somewhere in between.
Yes.
With you, at one point, I called and you were like really pessimistic, but then you dropped in at the end. Yeah, we've just signed up one of the biggest first-year contracts that we've ever had.
Yes.
The concern is not being able to deliver. To which it kind of perplexed me a little bit, because I was like, well, that's one of the most positive
Yes. What are you complaining about? I think you said,
exactly. But yeah, like I think in comparison, I think what you've been doing and where the business has been, like say, a lot of companies have been over precautious and used the furlough scheme maybe when they haven't had to, just because of the fear of the unknown and how long this might last. So it echoes a lot of the conversations, except in your instance, you were then calling out for the team to then deliver on the work that you'd actually brought in. So
it was so funny, that conversation, because I kind of caught myself just complaining that, you know, we've won this massive contract now, and you know, we just weren't expecting. We've got all this work to do now. Like, well, that's good, Andy. That's good. Oh yeah, of course it is. Of course.
yeah.
And you know, it was a really unique situation. I don't think I'll ever have the opportunity to get in. I hope I don't, by the way. But to be in that position where you've got, you know, almost a blank canvas, you decide which skills you want to turn back on in the business. You bring the people back that you need. You don't bring more people back than you need at that point. So we went through quite a lengthy process with the team to try and identify the right people and the right timings for them to return. We did a lot as well in terms of, we optionally topped up staff on furlough. So, you know, for quite a few reasons. I mean, firstly, that obligation that you have to the team that has got you here. But we also wanted to be able to pick up the phone to them in these kind of scenarios and say, we've just signed a big contract. Will you come back? We want you. And, you know, every single person that had that conversation, and it was one of the highlights really of the last 6 months, phoning staff members to say, can you come back? We need you. And to hear that, well, yeah, I'm ready now. Can I start now? Well, maybe next week. And it was just great to actually build the team back up again and bring people in. And every time that we brought people in, we did it because we absolutely needed them. So we've gone through this really strange exercise where we've come to, you know, all staff are now working again, but I can sit there and look at each of the members of staff and go, you're here because we need you. And we've tested that in a really extreme way, but we've tested that, and you've come back in and had a massive impact when you have. I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because you know, selecting the members of staff that you need to furlough. There's obviously shared skills and picking the right people for the right reasons, and you know, all those decisions are horrible to have to make, but you have to make them for the good of the business. And as I say, we're doing the best we could for each of the individuals as well, and keeping them updated on progress. You know, all staff emails regularly and things like that. But it's, yeah, what a bizarre few months, because you had a few furloughed as well, didn't you?
Yeah, we went down to 3 at one point in our team. Originally we started pre all this with 9, so we've got 1 left to bring back in. But kind of from our side, like, we've been in the trenches with those who remained, but I've got as much respect for those who went on furlough, because they've bounced back, returned, and had the mentality to just get stuck straight back in. And it's a massive appreciation from my side on that, because I don't know what they've gone through. You don't know what the products are of that, of a furlough situation. Although I've got 1 left to bring back in, and I know she's chomping at the bit, and I'm keep speaking to her on a weekly basis. And you know that when they get, you know, the teams back in, they just get on with it with probably more enthusiasm than they had prior to all this.
It's funny because I think we probably had this conversation as well, but there was times when we were sat there in the very early stage of this where there were just a few of us in the business. So they're going, would I rather be on furlough now? Would I rather be here? And it's not a clear cut, actually. You know, it was really tough for people being, as I say, being at home, and a lot of the time, you know, our kids being at home as well, doing the homeschooling thing, and partners being, you know, really, really testing time. And likewise in the business, you had people that were trying to pick up the work of, you know, 3 times the size as a normal workforce, you know, and putting all the hours in. And we've got this really strange scenario now where everyone's got loads of holidays left to take.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that bit.
It's been quite funny because some of our returning to from furlough members of staff actually gone and taken holidays again now. I think they've kind of got that taste for having time to read, and I think, you know, I think there'll be a culture shift in terms of actually valuing that time that you have, valuing the time at home, valuing the time to spend, you know, on yourself. You know, a lot of the team spent time reading, doing online courses, and trying to prepare themselves to come back to work in an enhanced capacity. So I'm hoping that we do take a lot of the positives from that experience.
Yeah. We've got to come, I guess, learn from what we've been through. Obviously, like we've alluded to, we've spoken quite a few times, or had FaceTime calls throughout the whole of the lockdown period and since. With a lot of the takeaways that I've got from you is that you've been using that time, like as you've sort of been alluding to restructure, to consolidate, and ultimately, get yourself ready to kick on when some normality returns. I guess we're there or edging close to it. Can you tell us why you chose this time to do that, to take stock, and yeah, talk us through some of the steps that you've taken there?
Sure. I mean, as I say, that really unique opportunity to kind of wipe the slate clean and then say, right, what do we need in this business, and bring people back. I mean, the vast majority of every single furloughed member of staff will return and has returned to Collabco. So we've not made any kind of redundancies of furloughed staff, and we anticipate growing that team. And we've brought in a couple of new people recently. We've got another couple of jobs live as well, and obviously you and I are speaking about some opportunities to grow the team. But I look at really the management team is where we've seen the vast majority of changes. Looking around the table now at the management team, we've got people that weren't even in the business 2 years ago in a few roles, a real mix of vast experience. We've got one person that's been here for a long time in the development team who's running that team at the moment. We've got amazing experience in marketing with our marketing director, having worked at places like Bank of America, and bringing that kind of really corporate big business experience to what is a small team. We've recently brought product to that table. We've brought sales and marketing, new sales and marketing people in, and really the energy in that group now is it's a group of people that believe in the direction of the business. It's a group of people that are hungry and driven and motivated. But I think that the thing that has struck me really about some of the changes we've made is the kind of heated debates that we now have. I really actually feel that was lacking for quite a long period of time at Collabco, where people feel so strongly about something they actually will fight their corner and argue the point and get emotionally invested in a decision. And as you know, they're the best conversations to be part of. They're the ones that matter. Whether we should do A or B, we'll pick one of those ultimately, but the journey of getting to the right decision is now a really enjoyable one, and really, just a great experience to be part of. And by the time we've selected A or B, there'll obviously be some people on one side or the other that are happy and unhappy with that decision, but everyone is behind it because we've really kind of fought it out. And I think that's down to making some changes at very senior level. So we've made some changes at board level. So one of our longest serving members of staff, director and shareholder, left the business at the end of July. And what we've lost in a vast amount of experience and skill and operational control that he had in the business, we've actually gained in almost freeing everyone else up. We've really said we're starting again. We're going around the loop again. We're putting the right people in the right roles and driving it forward. And almost as well, nobody is here forever. Nobody will still be at Collabco, indefinitely, myself included. We will always have the right people for the right roles across the business. And I think there's a real energy and belief in what we're trying to do there. And there's more to do. Obviously, as you bring in a management team and they start getting their feet under the table and they start delivering their own strategies, there's going to be changes that cascade down then in the way we do things and the type of skills that we need and the approaches and techniques that we use that will allow us, and I genuinely believe will allow us to take that leap into Europe and possibly even the US in the next couple of years, which we just haven't had the scale and arguably the caliber of individual in the team before to really grapple with the challenge that would present. Whereas we're getting there, and it's so exciting. But to answer if I have answered any of your questions so far, but to try and answer the why now, really just the challenge will either do one or two things. It will either defeat you and you can kind of shy away from that and bury your head in the sand and hopefully just scrape through. And a lot of businesses haven't even been able to do that. Or you can say, what do we need to do? If we can survive a global pandemic, we can survive anything and we can go on to scale this business. And with the belief that we've got, honestly, the belief and commitment will drive us to that next level. And that's come about through this challenge, I'd argue.
That's great. So is there any key lessons that you've taken from this restructure that are worth sharing?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, to be honest, I have this with pretty much every decision. I always have this feeling that I could have done it sooner. I think that's probably fairly normal. You do something and it works, you always say 6 months earlier would have been even better, of course. I think, that taking, personal lessons, I actually think COVID invoked a reaction in me. It really did kind of challenge me personally. It, made me question everything about the business, everything about what we've been trying to do. One thing that I'd like to take away from this is that I can do that without a global pandemic to kind of, set that level of challenge. So to really take, almost peel back all the layers of the business, which is what we did back in March, and look at literally every cost we had, every single investment that we were making in the business, right from, a few pound a month technology subscriptions to very, senior people in the business on the salary. It's to understand your business to that level of detail, I think is a challenge that I'd never really taken the time to grapple with, because there's always the exciting stuff, isn't there, as a CEO? There's always the new big sales shiny opportunity you can go and help out in, or there's the, working with the team and allowing them to try and, craft their own areas. But to go and have that time, and, we changed our finance director last year, which at the time was quite a tough decision, to be honest, because the previous guy had been with us for a long time, left a lot of knowledge, left with a lot of knowledge in his head. But we got someone else in, and he's just been absolutely incredible. He's really, really experienced. He's patient. He's, considering he works a day or two a week with us. I speak to him every single day of the week. He's one of those people that just there and on hand. So having someone with that experience combined with kind of vision and direction that I was trying to set, with a very supportive chair and investors, and that by the time we'd gone through that painful few weeks of looking at the business and evaluating it, we came out knowing everything. Back in March, you could have asked me how much we spent on bottles of water in the last 12 months, and I would have been able to tell you how much we spent on sparkling. And still, it really kind of got into the levels of detail in the business to make better decisions about it. And I'm not saying I'm going to do that every year now. If people want a bottle of water, they can go and do that without me needing to know. But how do we maintain the focus, I think, is the right question for me. Get that focus right on what we're trying to do, what we've done in the past, and moving it forward. But yeah, I would have done it all 12 months ago, Chris, if I could have, with hindsight. But that's life.
Okay, moving forward from it then, now we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, or hopefully, or whichever newspaper you read.
None of them anymore.
Yeah, it's not a bad shout. What's the kind of focus then for the business over the next 6 months, even through as far as 5 years ahead in time? What's the immediate and longer term goals now?
So, I mean, to be honest, I actually think the light at the end of the Collabco tunnel was back in April. We had a very short tunnel, and it was very dark for a period, but there was light when we kind of got through March, and seeing the validation of our product offering, seeing the validation of everything from the pricing to our approach to the way we deliver projects, was just such a massive boost of confidence for us to carry on doing what we're doing. We've got an incredible product. The usage of our platform for students, I think it almost tripled in early COVID, in terms of that primary communications channel to let people know in this time of uncertainty what they needed to. Our platform was at the forefront of that. We've seen customers use our platform for things that we'd never considered before, booking space now in a reduced capacity setting on a mobile device instead of, touch screens that can be contaminated, or phoning members of staff, which, they might not be on site anymore. All these things, we've seen our platform really kind of be grabbed and ran with by the customer base. We're also seeing a very strong validation of the product offering in continental Europe, which is a market we've been trying to get into for the last 4 or 5 years. And I think when I say trying, we've always tried to sell to Europe from a UK-based sales team, where, purely due to the size of the business, you'd have a salesperson that have, let's say, the northern part of the UK and Scandinavia. And I know if I was a salesperson where I'd spend most of my time looking for opportunities. It would be in my home, local language, down the
Absolutely.
road opportunities. Yeah, absolutely. With a really developed market and great referenceability here. So, we kind of learned from that. We've actually, she signed a contract last week. Actually, we've actually hired our first, was based in Amsterdam, our first European-based, non-UK-based employee. And it's really now putting the investment behind the things that we've extensively tested. I've had no doubt since I've joined this business and prior to joining this business that there's a very strong market for our technology in Europe. I believe there's a strong market in the US as well. And it's just about the execution. And again, there's no secrets. You just find you'll know this, the right people that fit into your culture that will go and just, proclaim the great word about your product, really kind of evangelize about your product in those markets. And it's a real privilege working in the education market, because you have got institutions that want to be innovative, they want to be the first, they want to try things, and you've also got a nice mix of people that will only do it when everyone else has. So it's a great recipe. You go and you get those early adopters, get some good referenceability, and the rest will follow. And that's a model that we've done very well in the UK. We've got we're the market leader now in the UK education space. And I think we can easily translate that. And I genuinely mean easily. It's, there's some challenges around, getting the costing right and finding the right people. But the actual basic premise of it is simple. Right people in the right place. We know the product's working already. And we've got strong references now in that part of the world. So for me, if there's anything that I'm taking out of COVID, it's carry on doing all the stuff that we know we're good at, all the stuff that we know is working. And it's been validated in one of the harshest climates that we could imagine, where budgets really are constrained and buying decisions are slowed down, and travel, we've sold, I told you at the beginning, we've sold 3 international sites across Europe without traveling to any of them. Whereas, 6 months ago when we spoke, I'd have been in a different airport every couple of weeks. We don't need to do that, by the way, anymore. And I think it really will allow us to scale and take some of the learnings and try and keep that level of loyalty and commitment we've got with staff and the belief in the platform and drive it forward. So yeah, nothing earth-shattering. We just carry on doing what we've kind of verified as being good.
No, I mean, to be fair, I'd echo that from our side of things. We've not necessarily changed the way in which we've done things, but I think we're definitely going to come out stronger for it. I think you realise some of your weaknesses, and I think you hopefully address those. And then I think, like we alluded to earlier, I think the mentality of the staff has changed. I think people appreciate, and if they're truly bought into the brand and the way you do things, are more passionate about it, more driven about it now, following everything we've been through.
I think the mentality of your customers will have changed as well, because I will look back on this period of time and think, who did I go through that journey with? And you'll be one of the people on that list. We spoke regularly throughout this crisis, and hopefully it was as useful for you as it was for me. And you don't have to answer now.
Yes.
Even the weird moments where we were on a FaceTime call and you screenshotted and it came up on my phone that he's taking a screenshot of your face was, it was mildly uncomfortable, to say the least. But I knew that the value was there for me to kind of persist with this.
That was an accident. It was a new phone. I didn't know what the button did, and that was very embarrassing. Thanks for bringing that up.
No, that's fine. It's just I would have deleted it, but your background on your phone was a bit weird as well. But anyway, but on a serious note, actually, the way that you've been through this process with us, and what, the kind of things that we were struggling with, a lot of the time emotional decisions about the people and the cultural impact of furloughing would have had. And I know that a great credit to the way that you guys work. You told me on one of the calls that one of the people that you'd placed in our business, you'd caught up with, or one of your team had caught up with, and he was just wanted to know when he was coming back and just wanted a bit of an update. And I'd never have got that. This is someone that is in one of the teams that reports to me, but it doesn't report to me directly. And just having that insight and the market insight as well, knowing what was going on in the Northwest and Manchester in terms of the job market, is a real powerful indicator for us in terms of deciding whether it is too early to really kind of turn furlough off and go full steam ahead. And it was invaluable, to be honest, having those conversations.
Appreciate that. From my side of things, it was as much as anything sanity checking what everyone else was going through.
Yes.
Like such an unknown, and you don't know what others are are dealing with. And it was a lot of the time it was very similar conversations, and us both realizing that I think a lot of your staff and a lot of the situations that you're going through are echoed in businesses in different industries, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, when we start moving forward and we start looking at growing the business, we'll be looking for those. Well, firstly, the businesses that have survived. And I think genuinely there have been some very unlucky businesses. I mean, you know, genuinely out of their control, you know, issues that have arisen. But I think the businesses that have survived, the vast majority of them have survived because of the way that they've approached it. There was, you know, government help available. There were, you know, opportunities to make savings in the business when, you know, the furlough scheme is a great example of something that you actually don't have. You can just remove the vast majority of your cost overnight and not worry about the individuals and scale up at the right point. And I think, you know, the way that you've approached it in partnership with the companies you work with, and being that kind of connected or connection really between us and all the other businesses in the Northwest was so powerful. And I think that'll, you know, that'll bear fruit for both of us moving forward, I think.
No, I appreciate that. I obviously have to pay you for saying that at the end of this, clearly with a free placement or something like that. But yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for
Free
that.
placement, you heard it here first. There we go.
well, we'll see.
It's been recorded.
Yeah, it is actually. It's unfortunate. We'll delete that bit. The final question before we open up to the floor and to the audience to ask questions. But obviously, as CEO during this time, what has been the biggest challenge or even biggest surprise for you?
I think the biggest challenge for me is always on the people side. You know, really having to make those tough calls on people that you're really going to be. You know, for some people this is great, and for others it's a real challenge. But you know, condemning them to spend 4 or 5 months at home with the family, but you know, having to make those decisions on asking people to step out of the business, and knowing that there's always that niggling doubt that I'd have if I was in their position, that this is because I don't add as much value as someone else, or because I'm, you know, my job's ultimately at risk, and trying to manage all that emotion and convince people that actually we are doing this for the good of the business, and we're doing it now so that there is a job for you to come back to. And you know, I really am confident that, you know, now that the team are back and we can, you know, we're organising a company-wide day in a month or so, but to be able to stand there now and say, look, we did this so that we could be in this position. If we hadn't, we'd be talking about redundancies now, not talking about scaling and growth. And so that's been the biggest challenge really, because it's such a tough thing to do. But you know, equally linked to that, the biggest surprise has been the way every single member of staff has acknowledged the situation, has embraced it, and has come back, as you described before, with, you know, the fire in the belly again. They're ready to come back. They've not just like back to work, back to the daily grind. Like, when can I come back? I want this job. I didn't realise how much I loved working until I was forced to sit at home for how many weeks, and really to try and keep that energy and keep that belief, and you know, without reminding someone, without saying, remember that time you spent 6 months at home and you hated it, without having to say that, just have, you know, we're doing some work around our values now to really try and encompass some of these feelings that we've had and some of the kind of the parts of the journey we've been on, to embed these into the business moving forward. But that was by far the hardest, because the finance stuff is easy, and I say it's easy because I've got a great FD that, you know, you can really set that roadmap out of the areas of the business you need to save, and he's just able to present the numbers back to you in a really simple way. So we knew it was the right decision. You know, I'd go further than that. She goes far to say it was probably the only option we had at that time to make the furlough adjustments that we did. And it's, you know, it's been vindicated in the outcome really. But at the time, you are doing it in a very uncertain climate, and you know, there's a part of you that's asking people to step out of the business, not really knowing, genuinely not really knowing whether you would be asking them to come back in a few months' time. But as I say, we've done well, and everyone's back plus extras, which is another weird thing. I know you've done webinars on this, but recruiting people remotely as well is a really strange experience for them and for us. But yeah, interesting few months.
Yeah, indeed. Right, just so everyone watching, if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A section, the question section, and I will ask Andy those questions. So if you can start firing those through, I'll start peppering Andy with those questions if there's anything you want to learn from him directly. And one question that's already come through for you, Andy, is how important do you think it is for an ambitious startup to establish a solid product function?
Yeah, right, it's vital, really. I mean, I think having a solid product offering, a solid product market proposition is, you're not going to get anywhere without that at all. I think it's really interesting, and I describe ourselves as being in this transition period now where when you have a founder, the founder will turn up with an amazing idea. They'll have a really clear view in the head of what this product or service is going to be about and what the impact will be. You go through your research, you test that, you get a few customers, you validate it, you go back to your customers, you check, and you build your roadmap. And that kind of works well when you've got that founder that's spending, listen to someone like someone like Michael at the beginning, spending 18 hours a day doing that, and then doing a sales meeting the next day. I mean, if you could do that at scale, it'd be incredible. Having the person that thought of the idea going and pitch it to the people that are going to buy it and bring that feedback back in, it'd be great. So we're in this transition period now where we still have a founder, as I said, but in terms of trying to get to that scale, we're talking about attacking 5 or 6 different territories here, not just language barriers, but cultural differences, education system differences. Mentioned we've got healthcare and local government side. All these challenges mean that it's not enough for one person to kind of mull these over in the spare time while doing a full-time day job. So we're at a point where we believe that we need a solid product function moving forward. We've got someone that's stepped from customer success into product management, bringing all that experience of working with customers and seeing those challenges day to day to try and put a process in place to try and guide the business decisions, because it isn't a couple of customers asking you for things anymore. It's 100 customers, all with slightly varying views on the same thing, with a whole market of thousands of customers that want to do something a little bit differently. And then you've got your regional considerations. You can't do that just by thinking it through. You need a process and a system and a framework to do that. And yeah, I'd argue it's absolutely critical, more for to kind of in the detail of the question there, but more for that scale up stage necessarily than a startup. But I think it's critical.
Great. One question that's come through is really around the furlough side of things and the staff. What steps did you take to keep morale up? Well, you still had the team furloughed. Did you have any suggestions that you found worked well?
I guess this is something that I'd have to hold my hands up and say we should have done more. I mean, we set up a WhatsApp group and things like that. I know that there were things like quizzes that we did across the team, but it's really hard actually as the formal communications and the informal communications. I think formal communications, we did I'd say almost weekly update to staff that just went out from me and to their email accounts, their work email accounts, which to be honest they may or may not have been logging into. I think the vast majority were checking. But then the informal side of things is a really tough thing to try and do, because obviously the strict rules of the furlough scheme are not giving staff shouldn't really be doing any work. So if you're even communicating with them, I was very, very careful about that in terms of the informal channels. But yeah, we could have done a lot more. We strongly encouraged team managers, line managers, to get in touch regularly with the team, and I think some of them did great. And I know of at least 2 unofficial WhatsApp groups where things were happening, off the kind of normal working pattern of Collabco, which is great to hear. And I think the real test is when people come back, and we're running a staff survey before our company day in a few weeks to understand what the impact of this has been, alongside a broader question about working from home generally. And I think that's really where you have to consider that sense of connection and the morale. How do we maintain that, not just because of furlough, but if we switch to a primarily remote organisation, how do we maintain those relationships and in a lot of cases friendships while doing everything like this? And we do get good at adapting to this and communicating like this, but you can't beat that face-to-face and physical connection. So these are all challenges that, you know, we're still thinking about. We want to get a bit more insight from staff and learn from the lessons of furlough. But yeah, I think we could have done more on the informal, is my honest answer.
Yeah, no, one thing I must admit we did really well. Credit to the business. We had a Burn Sheehan Fitness Club WhatsApp group, and it was everyone just posting what they were doing, especially early in lockdown, just hitting, you know, the 5K that they ran, the 10K that they ran, the time, and it pushed people along. And there were certain few times where I was sat there and people were starting to post in the group just on my evening, and I was just sat there chilling out, and I was like, right, okay, I'm not having this. And actually, like, I'm going to have to go and do something now because everyone else is being active and I'm not. So it was something that the little fitness club has died off a bit now because people are obviously allowed out and about a bit more, but that really kicked us on. I think it was a great bit of sort of socialising for a few members of the team anyway, to tell everyone what they were doing on a regular basis.
I'm going to regret asking this, I know I am already, but do you have the best 5K time?
Absolutely. It's sub 20 minutes, so that was well, not that they've shown me. Yeah, did it once and that'll do. I'm never sub 20 minute again.
That was basically your goal at the start of lockdown, wasn't it? You were kind of going for that sub 20 minute 5K, and I went out and tried it. I got to 25 and thought, that'll do for me.
That'll do.
Yeah. Pleased with that. I'm not going to do any better.
That's fair. Has the management changes in the COVID situation changed the culture of the team in any way? And if so, how?
So yeah, the first part of the question is very easy. Yeah, the culture has changed. The how is a really tough question. It's a lot of, I'd say, a lot of little ways. You know, I mentioned briefly the kind of more passion and energy in the discussions that we have. You know, our decision making now is much more. It's a group of people that care about the decision and are committed to finding the right one, rather than we've got to make a decision. They're probably both all right. And it really, the importance and the significance of that is huge across the business. I've mentioned that we're trying to embed values, and we've been, to be honest, we've been round and round with trying to find the right words for the values in the business over the last couple of years. We've got to a point where we've kind of got 4 that fit what the team have already fed back to us, but also strongly resonate with the business that we've got now. And I think it's been easier to articulate because the culture has become stronger. I've always just believed that we had a kind of tacit culture almost, where you can feel it. You can't quite describe it, but you can feel it. There is a culture. And I thought that was great. Actually, you hear people like Google talk about how they've got that kind of culture where, you know, the first day an employee turns up to Google, they go for a coffee in the Googleplex with their line manager, and they look around and they get the free food and they go, I know what Google is. I can see it. I can feel it. So I was arrogant enough to think we had that at Collabco, but we didn't. But what we've been able to do is strengthen the culture, and actually what a surprise, when we've strengthened it, being able to articulate it has been easier. So we've got 4 really strong values that we'll be rolling out, or I guess say rolling out, we'll be articulating to the team as recognition of what kind of behavior.
Andy, you seem to have cut off on my side there, mate. Can't seem to hear you now. Andy, I don't know if anyone else has, I've lost you for some reason there. You seem to have cut off a little bit, but I guess on losing comms there, it just seems to have dropped off. No idea as to why. I can see you moving, your lips moving, but it's the actual noise is completely gone. I guess look, I guess we'll come to the 45-minute point anyway, but we'll wrap it up there. Appreciate your time, Andy. Sorry, I don't know what else happened. It's right at the end there. A little bit of an odd drop off. Really appreciate those who've dialed in and watched live. Hopefully it was some useful information on what Collabco have gone through there and how it's gone about. But look, it was another great webinar, great podcast, hopefully for those to listen afterwards as well. If you've got any questions, you want to be involved in another podcast with us, feel free to reach out to myself, Chris M at burnsheehan.co.uk, connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'll be keen to listen to others and other people who want to add and talk to a wider audience about what they've been through throughout the last 6 months, years, and what their goals are. Thanks again. We'll leave it there, but I know, Andy, thanks a lot for getting involved. Really appreciate it, and I'll speak to you again soon.